Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Suter. I'm the founder of the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and welcome to our 2021 Zero Trust Security Virtual Summit. We're going to have a fantastic day today, afternoon, and I'd like to thank our partners over at Trend Micro and August Shell. They've been great partners of ATARC, and specifically from Trend Micro, I'd like to thank Kimberly Middleman, Federal Marketing Manager, and Dean Kiefer, who kind of was the brainchild behind this thing. And he is Trend Micro's Federal Civilian Territory Manager. We're going to be hearing from Dean toward the end. And I'd also like to thank our amazing panelists for today. And I'd like to thank you for joining us. So we're really excited about today. So if I can bring on my first panel, that would be fantastic. Okay, there we go. Great. One second. So I will introduce the panelists in real quick introductions, and then we'll go into it. But I have with us today Trifenia Salzman, who's security architect at U.S. Small Business Administration. How are you doing today, Trifenia?
Good. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Are you working out of the house today or at the office?
I am actually in a co-working space.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah. And next up, we have Jerry Karen. And Jerry is Director of Enterprise Network Management of the Bureau of Information Resources at Department of State. He has a little side gig going on at HHS, which we'll hear about. And Jerry, you are definitely in an office. It looks like your State Department one, but I might be wrong.
No, you're correct. I'm in my State Department office today.
Yep.
On my HHS laptop.
Fantastic. And next we have with us Todd Mckeever, and Todd is computer scientist, airport data and airspace branch, AAS-120, Office of Airport Safety and Standards at the Federal Aviation Administration. So that's a handful on the title there. But
how you doing?
Doing great, doing great. I don't know, I don't want to call you out or anything. That looks kind of like a perfect background there, huh?
Yeah.
I know you're going under renovations over at the FAA, but I didn't know they were done yet. Thanks for joining us today. And then we also have with us Mr. John Hickey, President of August Shell. And good to have you today, John. And of course, John was a long time worked at DISA. And I think you had a few gigs that we bumped into each other, especially the cybersecurity is the your last posting there. How are you doing today, John?
Doing well, Tom. And I feel bad. I'm the only one that's like in a COVID bedroom or something. So.
I know. Are you out west? Is this your western headquarters?
I am out west, waiting for 5 feet of snow to land. That's what's expected. So I'm hoping so.
Good times. Good times. And last, but certainly not least, we have Greg Young, who's Vice President of Cybersecurity at Trend Micro. How are you doing today, Greg?
Oh, great. Really honored to be here amongst this August company.
Fantastic. And where you hail from? What part of the country?
Normally, I'm based out of Ottawa, Canada, but right now I'm in a secure undisclosed location, which is actually in Bridgetown, Barbados. I'm helping the government here.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, I kind of like that assignment. Next time, I can help you out a little bit. Now that sounds like one of those assignments I want to be on. I don't know about Ottawa, Canada. I've been there during the winter. I'm not sure if I might try that one out in the summer. So we're going to dive right into it. And the first panelist we're going to have, we'll start off with Jerry Karen at State. And Jerry is besides his couple of day jobs that this man has, he also is running our Zero Trust effort here, working group at ATARC. And we actually have some kind of breaking news, and I will let Jerry have the honor and privilege of breaking it.
So I just want to point out that Trifenia is the co-chair along with me as well. So we both co-chair ATARC. So quick update on what we're doing with the Zero Trust Working Group, and Trifenia feel free to add on. but we have started the Zero Trust working group. We have successfully done the TIC 3.0 working group, and we're grandfathering in all those participants into the Zero Trust because we believe TIC fits into the overall architecture of Zero Trust. So we started off with mostly government folks, a few contractors, vendors, and started with the education of what is Zero Trust, because we found out everybody has a different standard or different definition. So we started out with an architecture that I actually developed. And then we did some sub-working groups in which we're taking some of the concepts within our architecture and building up on that, defining some of that a little more in detail, as well as use cases, business cases, and things like that. So we're systematically going through there. In parallel, we also have a Zero Trust working group for the vendors, and we're running that in parallel. So while the government is doing their deliveries and getting level set on requirements and architecture and definitions and concepts and use cases, that output comes out of the government, we are feeding that to the vendors so they can get started. And I think we got about, I want to say 15 to 20 reaching around the area right now. So it's a very large working group, and I think we got over 16 agencies represented on. So at some point when all those deliverables on the government side are complete, we'll merge the two groups and we'll start logistics and building proof of concepts and showcasing possibilities. Two of the big, I think, ticket items that we have is we have talked with the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation Program at DHS and the program manager there. And we expect that they will be participating in our working group. So working with the CDM program as they transition towards a Zero Trust kind of concept, we'll be able to work directly with influence. They'll have direct feedback from the government folks, direct access to the vendors, as well as we just talked to the federal CISO the other day as well, and we expect that he will be having somebody participate in our working group as well. So having those two entities, I think, makes this working group pretty powerful, and not I don't know, for lack of a better term, it's great participation, right? And we're really influencing the government at this point, and getting levels set with the government and how we can change and influence, the culture change that Zero Trust brings along. So I'm really excited. Trefinia, was there anything I forgot or missed?
Yeah, no, most of it. The part I'm really excited about is demystifying Zero Trust, because we actually provide requirements, components, like the technical requirements of what Zero Trust means. And it's really helpful as an architect or an engineer or an analyst to be able to implement that in your environment.
Great. And even some more background. I talked to Kevin Cox about this maybe about a year and a half ago. And I said, well, let us do the TIC 3.0 one. And then that worked out really well under both of your leadership. And we're really excited to have this partnership with the CDM program to kind of really, and the Zero Trust is the first piece to that, is really work on security and have a lab, actually play around with it. I think that I really like the model that you guys came up with, that the government has a chance to kind of work things out on their own, and they don't, and then they kind of kick it over to the vendors, and then everybody comes together. I think that's a really good model for making the sausage. So that's fantastic. And so I guess I'm just kind of making this up as I go, but that's kind of the kickoff. So how about your own agency? Maybe we'll go, since I have you on, Trefinia, maybe talk about, the way SBA is looking at it. Then I'll go back to you, Jerry, and then we'll introduce everybody else. So.
Yeah, so my name's Trefinia, for those that don't know me, and I'm a security architect at the SBA. And one of the initiatives I'm working on is Zero Trust in the SBA. And what that looks like is taking an inventory of all of our tools currently, gathering all the knowledge that I can from different processes and procedures, and then actually creating a plan to implement Zero Trust. So with Zero Trust, it can be a little overwhelming if you're just getting started, but my best advice to you is, if you're implementing this for your agency, is to take a step back, take a breather, and evaluate what you currently have, and then be able to architect that desired state. And so that's what we're working on at the SBA.
It's fantastic. And of course, you guys are right in the middle of the Paycheck Protection Program. And this has been it's been about a year, right? Where you
Yeah.
guys have been just in breakneck speed. So thank you for all that. And I'm going to flip it back to Jerry. You've had a couple of roles here. You've been kind of working two jobs. If you can tell everybody about what you've been doing there, and then also internal to the state.
I'm taking Trifinia's advice, so I'm going on break right now. Take a breath, but seriously, some of the same things, Trifinia. I'm operations. I'm not security actually, but I do a lot of, we deal with a lot of implementation of security here at state in my office, which is enterprise network management. I'm the infrastructure person, but been on a lot of remediation and eviction type activities too. But so my emphasis has been a lot on the education and how to run a program, because Zero Trust is not a project that you just hand to the network guys or the identity guys. It takes a village, and an understanding. Everybody's got to get on that page. So you got to do that sell, and understand what the return on investment is, how it's going to better use our resources, and focusing on the things that we really protect. And I like to use the analogy of not doing that peanut butter spread approach where we're trying to do everything equal. Everything isn't equal, but really focusing on, like I call it, the crown jewels versus the bologna sandwich. If somebody takes my bologna sandwich, there's plenty of bologna in the world. I'll make another sandwich. But if my crown jewels get lost, we're in trouble. So I want to really put my focus over there. So really understanding the true concept of Zero Trust, the totality of what Zero Trust is, because a lot of people talk about niches of it and get those weeds. Really understand 800-207 is a recommended read if you are trying to understand Zero Trust. But that's kind of where I'm coming from. So that's my Department of State role. I am currently on detail at HHS OIG, where I'm serving as the acting CIO right now and introducing these same kind of concepts there. So starting out, I've just been there a couple months right now. Just starting out, introducing the architecture, the concepts, the ideas. But as Trifinia said, definitely take the inventory, because you're probably doing things. Understand what you may be doing that can contribute to Zero Trust, and then you start understanding your gaps if you understand the totality of Zero Trust and all the concepts, and break it down in that way. What I say is, Zero Trust is a journey. It's going to take a village. It's a multi-year program with multiple projects, but I'd rather be 5% than 0%. And I'd rather be effective than compliant. So I think Zero Trust really focuses on effectiveness, because you're focusing on what you want to protect. So I really believe in that, and compliance can fall in place as you.
Great. Well, thank you for that, Jerry. And we'll switch over to the FAA and Todd Mckeever. And wow, you guys got a heck of an environment. You've got like a lot of legacy, mainframes, et cetera, and then your network is all over the place. You got, sensors on runways and a very disparate systems, and a lot of legacy that you're working on. Big challenge for you, I'd imagine there, Todd.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we do have a lot of legacy systems, and like you stated, our network is spread out, but I think Zero Trust will take hold of that. It will actually implement a lot of the newer controls, and things. Actually, Zero Trust has actually evolved throughout the years, believe it or not. It also will take host of, I guess, telework. I mean, that's here to stay, and it's evolving. And I think Zero Trust is that mechanism that kind of looks at, bringing that security to the user, the end device. And I think with Internet of Things and especially within our environment, that's all going to integrate together.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And we'll move over to John Hickey and his DoD perspective. You spent most of your career over there.
Yeah, and again, DoD invested heavily in perimeter regional endpoint, kind of a defense in depth approach. And so I think when you start talking Zero Trust, and COVID, I think, has just brought this to the forefront. Many people, both on DoD and the intelligence side, never thought they might be working from home, right? As Jerry mentioned, he's got another network he's got to go be involved in. So sometimes you can't do that. But think of the approach that you know, what can you leverage that's in your network to get to a network that's, you know, potentially much more complicated than you ever thought it was going to be before. DoD was very slow, I would say, to moving to the cloud. And it wasn't because necessarily security always got blamed. I know I did often. But a lot of it was contracts and then how were you going to monitor the network, right? And that becomes an interesting proposal. So, but I would say a lot of it is we forget about endpoint when we start talking about zero trust and specifically endpoint security. And when we think of endpoints, everybody focuses on the end user, but I think of servers and specifically containers. And how do you protect that? And how do you get visibility across your growing enterprise in a multi-hybrid cloud environment? And I think zero trust is the foundation for looking at that and figuring out those tough problems. And I think COVID's just brought it faster and people can't ignore it anymore. So anyway, it's here. You got to figure it out. And I'll just leave it at that. So.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, John. And last but not least, Greg Young. And Greg, you've had the great opportunity to kind of work on the commercial side too. And you know, I'm always like fascinated. How does the commercial side compare to the government? And you're, you know, I know government's in your portfolio too, so you see things across government. So can't wait to hear your comments.
Yeah, no, I was former CISO at you know, Department of Communications, and 16 years before this, I was, excuse me, Gartner's lead for firewall and security architecture. So I got to see sort of all around the world these architectures change. And what was really clear was that there's been this pulling, like taffy almost, getting pulled apart for the architectures. And you know, the more we tried to go deeper in silos to, you know, put in safeguards there, the less it was scalable. And then technology changed, cloud, you know, people working from home, and that really kind of broke the model. I think it really opened the door for zero trust. So, you know, for decades we've been saying, you know, trust but verify has been this kind of terrible quote we've had, but really now it's flipped, and it has to be, you know, verify then trust. And just because you're in a zone does not mean that you know, you should be trusted. And even if you have an authorized identity, that doesn't mean that identity is healthy. There's a lot of factors. So I really like you know, the comment John just made, especially about endpoints being part of this, because these silos we've had, especially email being separate, the bad guys have wised up to that. So the architectures we've had, they don't work anymore. And we needed new technology, not just more point solutions all the time. So yeah, it's really changed. So financial services definitely have jumped on zero trust very heavily. And also medical, anything related to healthcare has had to do this. And also some interesting silos we've seen are verticals like pharmaceutical. So they have really done incredible things. In fact, they're some of the leaders we've seen embracing this technology.
No, thank you for that. And I want to remind everybody, please ask away on the questions. We'll try to get as many as we can. We want to make this interactive for you. And in a little bit, we're gonna run a couple of polls to get your blood running. But what is, I guess my first question is, okay, so for zero trust security, what does this actually mean for all federal requirements going forward? How is this going to affect the way we're doing systems and procurement? Maybe starting with you, Jerry.
I believe it's going to be a big culture change for the federal government. And I think it's not just technology. I think it's going to be people, process, and some standards that we have to look at across the federal government. As I said, and this is Jerry's opinion, of course, is we do that peanut butter spread approach where we try to do everything equally. And unfortunately, FISMA kind of is compliance. FATARA scorecard, if you look at that, is kind of compliance. You know, when you look at 800-53, it says a system must have authentication. That's one of the controls, for instance. All right, I can do username and password. I'm compliant. We're not. We got to focus more on effectiveness and being effective at our cybersecurity. because compliance does not equal effectiveness. So I'm really a big advocate for shifting that. So the challenge is I think, how do we measure effectiveness? We know we do red teams, we do blue teams and things like that, but how do we do that in an ongoing fashion? And I think Zero Trust kind of helps set up the foundation also for potentially ongoing authorization as well. Rather than doing that snapshot in time, and we know systems change over time and go and reassess, we can kind of do that because we're collecting all this telemetry and all this information and always managing risk in a dynamic way with Zero Trust. Now, we kind of get this telemetry to help you with ongoing authorization as well. So I think it's a good foundation to spring off on a lot of things in my eyes. So that culture change, I think, needs to shift, and we have to figure out how to effectively and constantly measure effectiveness. And that's just one talking point that I have. I could go on forever and fill up, but I want to give other people the opportunity to.
No problem. How about you, Trefinia?
Yeah, I think the challenge that has been presented is not only thinking of security in a silo, but involving all of the other people involved. Because with Zero Trust, in order to be properly effective, as Jerry was stating, you have to bring in multiple conversations from multiple different avenues: finance, privacy, even in the SBA, the loan officers, looking at their procedures, their processes, because ultimately Zero Trust, when it's properly implemented, is an enabler. It doesn't restrict, it enables the agency to work how they want, when they want, where they want. And that's what we're trying to go for. We're trying to bring security as an enabler and not something that restricts.
Great. And Todd, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement with both Jerry and Trefinia about, the change piece. It is a change in culture.
Yeah.
And the one thing is, when you gravitate towards that, you got to kind of do things in phases to bring folks on, kind of have lunch and learns, presentations, bring forth, that idea that, Zero Trust is more beneficial than any disadvantage. I mean, it's a return on investment for all to take part of, especially within, government organizations. So.
Great. And I'm moving over to you, John. And John, I also got a question directed to you. Do you mind elaborating on your endpoint philosophy in regards to Zero Trust?
Yeah, so I'll focus on that question first, but I think, the endpoint, because of where it sits, many people, we talk Zero Trust, and you'll read the identity pieces, which are true, the non-person entity pieces of understanding the device, but you can't forget that you've got to detect and respond, and you got to have visibility on that. So to me, the enemy's smart, and they will find the gaps. So I love the approach discussed earlier about the architecture. I think you've got to lay in, like, where you're going, and look at where you are, the traditional as is and to be, to get after that. And don't forget the importance of that endpoint. It might be the only place you have visibility of encrypted traffic that we know the nation state actors are going to use for command and control and execution, both inbound and outbound. So you've got to understand that. And then where I think a lot of people fail is, do those endpoints report in, into a centralized, BDP or data repository, and can you make that actionable information? Because again, the number of events coming at you on servers, applications, you name it, in the cloud, it's only going to grow, and humans can't process all that, right? So I think that visibility piece of this has to be an integral part, and that ties into my comment on the endpoint, knowing that. But if I was going to say anything, Zero Trust is truly, you got to lay out the architecture to really see where those seams and gaps are in it. And that goes all the way back to Jerry's point on the critical information. You got to know where that is, because you're not going to protect all. And the last thing I would say, being on the other side of the fence, is how are you going to pay for it? So, that cost factor and maybe what I'll call cost avoidance on future systems that you know may be legacy, and how you're going to look at return on investment from a measures of effectiveness standpoint. What are those tools and capabilities that can provide that situational awareness to measure that and inform that?
Yeah, good comments. And Greg, you know, I mean, I know you're in and out of government. You know, what does a zero trust mean for the federal and commercial as well?
Yeah, there's a lot of really, you know, I think folks are eager to understand it, but the level of understanding around sort of is really varied. You know, people just sort of looking for 5 pounds of it to buy off the shelf, but instead, you know, zero trust is really this kind of, you know, an approach, much like health. You're not healthy, you're not healthy. It's a spectrum, but there's some very sort of really specific technologies as you go further down the, you know, further down into the bubbles within the big bubble of zero trust, such as, you know, microsegmentation or SASE or zero trust edge. And there's some wins I think people can do there. So for example, you know, if you have a, you know, a CASB today, a cloud access security broker, moving it to be able to be invoked no matter where people are, you know, people are located as
Right.
they've been deployed now, people from home and the like. Yeah, it's you know, no matter where somebody is, that should be a factor in how they're trusted and how they connect.
Great. We're actually getting some really good questions. We've got one here. Can somebody speak to the issue of zero trust with partners downstream, tertiary partners, same with suppliers for government organization? How do you score and manage the risk? So maybe we can put that in our working group. And Greg, maybe I'll just start off with you, because I look at this with Gartner. This is like happened before, where you're worried about all the different things that connect. But maybe you can offer your perspective since we got you on.
Yeah, I think one of the broken models we've had in security, or one that's now broken, is sort of this, you know, very narrow APIs for things that you would have very prescriptive APIs. But, you know, having third parties, like you've already got a lot of technology there, you shouldn't have to rip it all out. Instead, you should be looking for your zero trust to be able to pull in information from a variety of sources. You shouldn't have to get rid of, you know, great tools that you have, but that collection of information is really what people are looking for now, especially from disparate sources. So John mentioned the endpoint, which has often been siloed out, and the same for other areas as well, such as email. So, and timeliness and not adding more people, it has to be a key success factor in any zero trust initiative.
Great, good answer. And we'll go back to our government colleagues, maybe starting with you, Jerry.
So this is one of the challenges we actually have come up during some of our discussions and talks. So we're talking about architecture, we're talking about concepts. Some of the technology's not there with some of the concepts yet. You know, we know it's being worked on. Some of these things like, you know, agency to agency sharing. You know, there are standards for how we classify data, how we, you know, sensitive but unclassified, top secret, but we still have all these little sub things where I may be sensitive but unclassified, but I got to share with the unclassified. So we have different, the standards aren't equal, right? We know DoD does classification different than some of the executive agencies and things. So we want to all share data though, you know, so, but we're all classifying. So when I talk about people process, that's some of the things we got to figure out. And that's some of the challenges we got to get over is, it's my data. I'm the authoritative source of it. I'm going to share it with Tom Suter. Do you have the controls and everything to be a good steward of that data that you're using, that I'm authoritative for, and sharing, and, you know, how you classify it, and understanding that is like, I got to understand the risk of sharing that data now with you. You know, do you have the same type of capabilities to control and protect it the same way if it's high value data, for instance? So there are there's some definite challenges. We're not in the prescriptive stage yet. We're hoping that with the ATARC, you know, we'll get some of those answers and some of those ideas. But I think there's some policy influencing and disruption that we have to do as well to try to get on the same page on some of these things. So definitely a challenge.
Yep. Well, how about you, Todd? Have you looked at this?
In some respects, I mean, at the FAA, things are kind of still rolling out. I know there's been some presentations and discussions about it. Actually, through this forum, I've met a few folks who are actually primarily working on Zero Trust and looking to work with us at ARP or airports to kind of roll out that proof of concept. So something is in the works. I'm thinking that type of implementation will foster across the FAA and also into, you know, the biggest organization, which is ATO.
Yep. Trevinia, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, definitely. Going back to the question, I think it's asking about supply chain risk, and it is something that you have to consider with Zero Trust. And like John and Greg were speaking to, you have to take into consideration the different pillars of Zero Trust asset, looking at that endpoint, the OS, the patch level, all of those different attributes of those pillars. From network traffic, is it segmented correctly? Is it using SD-WAN? What type of technologies is it using? Identity, who's accessing it? Looking at the service accounts. So there's different, to mitigate that supply chain risk, especially in government, you're taking a look at all of these different pieces in order for you to get the complete picture. And that's what Zero Trust really does, is it offers that complete picture, not just one slice of the puzzle, not just this is a service account and they have access to this resource. So it gives us a lot more information than we would have otherwise.
Great, thank you. And John, I know you've been out of mobile for a while, but I'm going to pull you right back in. We got a question about a device integrity specific to mobile. Can we do a true Zero Trust without validating device integrity?
Yeah, and Tom, I wouldn't trust you. I've been on your network. No, just kidding. I do think we tried to tackle this a little bit when I was still in the government, and again made some good initiatives going back to some of the vendors in the mobile space. When you think of Samsung as an example, I'll just give that there. We worked with multiple vendors in that space, but I think you're going to have to concentrate on a set of devices for mobile, and that's why DoD now calls it bring your own authorized device, right? You know, you can't open it up, and we learned this lesson early on in DoD mobility. The pure volume of Android devices out there is huge, right? And where they're manufactured and all those pieces that play in there, it would be very hard to control all of that. So I think whatever system you design for Zero Trust, there's levels of trust, right? And people are discussing now on a mobile device, can I view something, but only view? And can I tie that into, say, an O365 instance with strong granular control? And again, leaving the legal issues behind, that's the discussion started in 2011 of, wiping, spillages, downloading, and all those. Just think purely of how can we get the information to people that they can act on, and then what will we allow them to do based on the device, and specifically mobile or versus GFE that we trust, and what do we know about that device? We did do some hardware attestation and develop a standard with chip makers in this area when I was still in the department, kind of bleeding edge stuff, which has led to some of the OEMs supporting that, which allows you to actually trust a derived credential on a device, which to me is pretty good security given that, and you could put that on a user device. But where the department will go is this still being wrestled with, because it's still an issue of do you trust where that device is, who makes that device, obvious with sunbursts and solar winds, the supply chain of that device. In mobile, we know it's even more complicated. So lots of factors. Sorry, I didn't give you a specific answer, but I think there are opportunities and vendors out there that do want and will support some of these unique requirements across the federal government.
Yep, I think that's the answer they wanted at the end of the day anyway. So I think you got there. Good. okay, I'm an agency, I just walked in the door, and for organizations forming a zero trust strategy, how do you see organizations balancing efforts between top-down architecture, planning, and more specific use case analysis? And maybe I'll start off with you this time, Todd, because I know you just kind of got there. So you've just gone through this process, right?
Yeah, I mean, like I alluded to before, and you talk about a top-down process, it's more or less getting into the buy-in, right? Kind of conveying it to your senior leaders, your execs, and then kind of advocating that, that strategy down through the organization. And I talked about before with like lessons learned and presentations, but it's really a change piece. It gets into learning about zero trust, network segmentation, different concepts, for the end user, because they're, the employees are the ones who are gonna actually work with it, as along with the rest of the organization. But I kind of see it as me and others being a change agent with zero trust.
No, I think that's I think you're right about all that. Jerry?
So I started out with a lot of people, I noticed a lot of good names that are part of our working group here. And I appreciate their participation as always. The working group's great. I mean, we've had some great participation through TIC and now with the Zero Trust. And I really enjoy, working with all these folks. And they've all seen my graphical representation. I put together kind of a graphical representation and put it on a plotter-sized page, which is actually sitting over here, of this is Zero Trust as a whole. And I compartmentalize certain sections of what those Zero Trust. Here's the network piece. Here's the data piece. Here's the identity piece. Here's the dynamic piece. Here's the telemetry piece that we have to collect. So I started there. And so I'm controlling the conversation. I'm also educating and getting everybody on the same page of what is Zero Trust and seeing it graphically on one page. So I can say, well, you're talking about this piece of this box. We still have all of this stuff to do. So really controlling that conversation, really understanding and getting the ground rules of what are we talking about? What is the scope of what Zero Trust really is? Like I'll just use the example, some say identity is a new perimeter. Okay, that's fine, but it's not always a human accessing data. There's system to system, so, and it's not all about identity. Identity is a major piece. I call it one of the 3 pillars, for lack of a better term, of Zero Trust. But there's also endpoint, which I'd like to go back to endpoint at some point because I get some additional commentary on that. But I put /application because application facilitates access to what? The data for the user. So those are kind of the 3 pillars. So getting that good understanding, and then I look at it as a program, inventory the projects that may contribute, where are the gaps, and manage it as a program, not a project. You're giving it to the network people. You're not giving it to these people. It's a organizational thing that needs to change. So getting that buy-in and that understanding, and getting everybody that this is part of our architecture now. This is our security sub-architecture. This is actionable, and here we go. And taking it from that standpoint.
You're welcome to share that document if you'd like. If you can pull it
Yeah,
up.
I've shared it many a time, and anybody wants a document,
It's in the
Always share
working
it.
group.
Oh, it's in the working group.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but anybody that's outside the working group here, I'm always happy to share it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I meant share it on your screen in a second, but that's okay. We can do that. I don't know if you can
But
see
we don't
it.
have that much time.
Okay. Trifenia, I kind of got dissuaded from the original question, but is it top down use cases?
Yeah.
Where are you guys? Where's your head at SBA?
Yeah. So it came from the top down to make this happen. And like Jerry was saying, it's a little tricky because sometimes it can be perceived as a project. And how do you keep track of a project that's not really a project? So that's definitely been a challenge, and just trying to move forward with that and really communicating to everyone in the department not just security, but in operations as well, to get their buy-in is key. Like the network engineers, because they're implementing stuff, but in order for it to be truly zero trust, security needs to be working with them. So I would say right now at the SBA, we're working on the architecture plan, and we're continuing to communicate with each other to move forward in zero trust.
Great, great. And Greg, you got your trend micro hat on. I just think of all the Gartner research, you know, this is like back in your bailiwick. How do I implement zero trust? What are the, if you were to give agencies some ideas on that, what's your opinion?
Yeah, definitely sort of the top-down sponsorship is going to be key to this. You can still do it as kind of a stealth project, but if you've got the top-down help, that's going to be key. I think also, you know, traditionally we've always looked at sort of, authorized endpoints talking to sanctioned apps, and that's been the easy stuff. But clearly the inventory has to also account for unsanctioned applications and sort of unmanaged endpoints or unmanaged devices as well. And that scenario where you've got unmanaged endpoints talking to unsanctioned apps, if you can solve that, that's going to be the top of the pyramid. It's going to be the hardest one. But if you break up your work in that manner, I think you can be very successful. And I really liked Gerald's pillars as well, looking at not sort of putting everything in the identity basket, but spreading it across identity, posture management, inventory, segmentation, data inventory, data security, and also how this relates to partners and how you tie into them. So doing that inventory, cutting up the work and doing the architecture from that perspective, then you can sort of take your initiatives and put the pieces and weight them across those buckets.
Yep. And Mr. Hickey, I know you've got a lot of experience doing this at DISA. What are the lessons learned you've learned for any initiative, including this one?
Well, I think it does take a team, right? This is bigger than any one group in an organization. I think it's already been highlighted by the people on here. It takes a plan, right? You got to have a strategy and a plan, and then you've got to get to the use cases to get after something, right? You're not going to boil this in all in one instance. And I did see one of the questions is, you know, can you use one vendor to do this? Absolutely not. And any vendor that says they do all this, I giggle at. So that's not true, but you got to pick a solution set, right? And it's got to cover the pillars discussed. Otherwise, it's going to flounder, right? So.
No, I agree with you. I saw that question as well. It's just too broad, you know, your network components, you know, the application, it just isn't going to happen with one vendor. Let's go to some poll questions, Alyssa. We're going to start basic. I think we have 3, and this is part of us giving credits out. We do polls, but we have some pretty good questions here. How familiar are you with the zero trust, what zero trust security is? So please answer that. We're not showing who says what. So there's no attribution here. So just fire away, and we'll just give it a second. Alyssa, what do we have? We're going to pull this up. All right. Looks like we have some advertisement for the working group. I know what zero trust is, but I would like to know more about zero trust, implementing it throughout the federal government's importance. That's I think that's our winner. I think people in the working group might have spiked it here. I'm not sure. So that's a good thing. So the next 2 questions, if you don't like them, they're from Traphinia. So no, they're good questions. I'm just kidding.
The pressure.
So we'll give you your email afterwards. No, I'm just kidding. How far along do you feel? I'm going to let you read them, Traphinia. This is your question.
How far along do you feel the adoption of zero trust security is in your agency or company? We're fully committed. We've started, but have not fully implemented. We have the plan. We are currently just talking about it, and we have not adopted zero trust at all.
Okay. We'll give it just a couple of seconds, and I think we can do it. We got quick quick trigger fingers in this group, I think. So let's pull it up and then we'll go to last question. Last poll question.
Okay.
So what do you think?
I think these people need to join our working group.
Yeah. So it's the people that are in the work group and everybody else should join the working group. That's what we get for the poll questions today.
That's right.
And then the last poll question, which you're also going to read, Trafina.
All right.
Okay.
Let's see. Why implement the zero trust architecture? Number one, it's cool. It will be so helpful. It's a mandate, or honestly, I don't even know why we're talking about this.
Get some fun questions today.
Yeah.
Good job.
You're welcome.
All right. What do we have?
All right. It will be so helpful. I agree with that answer.
Yeah.
I think.
Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go for it, Jerry.
I was gonna say it's gonna be cool because we get t-shirts.
Yeah.
And tattoos.
Supposed to get this. That's a good idea. I like the t-shirt idea.
Tattoos.
Oh, man.
No, but
Greg, is there
Zero
anything-
Trust does, it's operational. It's not just security. I really think it can enable agencies and industries into what they want to implement. In order for them to do their mission, I believe Zero Trust can enable that.
Yeah. And Greg, what do you think? Did anything surprise you in this? Is industry far off, or is it on? Are we in the same state, or is there a little ahead? Love to. What do you think?
Yeah, I think for some of the implementation, some segments of industry are further ahead, but the architectural planning, which I think is the really sort of long-term success factors, that's definitely with the Fed, Fed and some of the states are really doing well. And I think to really get some value out of this and not just buy a bunch of stuff and have it sit on the shelf, I think that's going to be key because Zero Trust should be about solving hard security problems you haven't been able to solve now. And I think that planning and careful planning, but not too long, has to be part of it. This is not an overnight project, as was mentioned.
Great. And I'm going to stick with you, Greg, since I got you on my screen here. How have you seen Zero Trust since we've gone to COVID and we've gone to complete teleworking? Where, what's changed? It's been about a year, so we can actually say, here's where we were before. Where are we now? What are some of the trends that you've seen since we've gone teleworking?
Yeah, for such an awful year, there's been one of the bright lights has been that some of the remote working environments have really been a shock to the system for many enterprises and government agencies, and it's really forced them to do things that they've been putting off. So it's been good that way. So, for example, devices that are shared amongst family members, and the health of those is really questionable, and also the state of those changes minute by minute. That's been a real challenge for organizations who are used to having, a sanctioned device with a state, and it's assumed that there's one user and it's going to be inside your perimeter. That's really forced some relooking at architectures, security, and also recognizing that, hey, things are changing quickly all the time, and so does our environment, and our SOCs have to be reacting to this new kind of environment and be able to have visibility. So,
Great. Jerry, you want to add something here?
Yeah. So first of all, I think you wanted me to share. There it is.
All right.
Because I got a face for radio, so I'll put that up instead so nobody has to see me. So one of the things I want to pull on the endpoint aspect, and I don't disagree with anything anybody said, but the reality is when we talk about the culture change, we're used to putting agents on a desktop, but I can't put the same agents on a mobile device. So there's a different risk posture or a different risk tolerance for each of these different devices because they're managed in different ways. So I'm a big advocate for unified endpoint management so we can gain efficiencies and try to manage the risk, because why? They're all accessing the same data potentially, or I'm going to have to control because I have a different risk tolerance for different devices. Also, we're not managing everything. Everybody's used to everything being fully managed. We do BYOD nowadays, where we can access things. So I try to get some focus away from the endpoint in a way, There are certain things that you want to do with the endpoint, but I like to put /applications, because why? When I'm doing BYOD, I'm doing manage applications, or I'm managing applications through policy, because in reality, it's not necessarily the endpoint that facilitates access to the data. It's actually what application are they using, whether it be the browser or the application that's facilitating access to the data. So I kind of focus on that, because there's definitely different risk tolerances for different endpoints. So that's just one aspect, is the endpoint. Then there's different risk tolerances for how people are authenticating. We got different ways to authenticate. They're coming from a managed versus a non-managed network. There's all kinds of different factors that you have to take into account that tells what your risk tolerance is. And based on that, I may let you just do read only. I may not let you access certain applications. Or I have good confidence and my risk is low, I'm gonna let you download, print, and do, all the things that you need to do. But it's gotta be very dynamic, and there's a lot of telemetry I think you gotta collect. And like I said, this is my pictorial. It's meant to be printed on a plotter, but I do have a presentation that goes along with it. But I just wanted to share, this is how I graphically depicted, and this is what I use with my vendors. And I give this to the vendors, and I say, all right, here's my concepts, here's my zero trust architecture, here's my framework. What can you do? Where do you fit within what box or what part of the box? So that's kind of the way I look at it.
Fantastic. Is that possible to share to all the participants here? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to do that. It is on the Huddle site, I believe.
Okay.
As well, for those that are participating in the working group that haven't seen it. But yeah, I'm happy if you want to share.
I would, yeah, that's a
The more
great
we can
slide.
educate, the better we are as as a government.
That's where my head was at. Plus, we also answered another question. Trifina, do you want to add something to this topic?
The presentation that Jerry has, I would highly recommend looking it over, because it really does bring together zero trust and what that looks like, because there's so many different components of it that it's one step at a time. It's one step at a time.
Great. And Todd, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, zero trust is here to stay. And with telework, it kind of, like Greg had alluded to, is that it's kind of sped things up. The one piece I guess it really gets into, and I think Jerry talked about it, was the principle of least privilege, that kind of defines and sets what you can use and what you can't, and I think that's going to be fostered even more. Kind of disregarding the implicit trust piece. So
great, thank you for that. And John, I don't think I got to you on this question.
I love Jerry's chart. I love data being at the top, because I talked about endpoint being forgotten sometime from a security standpoint, but it is about the data, whether you're talking about endpoint data, your applications data, whatever that operational requirement is that's driven from a data from either a cybersecurity or a day-to-day operations of where that critical information is. So I think that's the piece, and you got to have a really good data architect to kind of lay out your zero trust architecture as well, or you're going to have challenge pulling that information in and acting on it. Over.
Great. Wow, this panel's gone by quick. It's been 55 minutes already. I don't know how that happened. Time warp or something. So anyway, Jerry, we'll start off with you, kind of closing comments. Where do you think we're going to be when we had the Zero Trust Summit in 2022, is it? What do you think we can get done this year? Where do you think the state of the federal government will be?
That's a really good question. There's a lot of influence. There's a lot of changing of concepts and culture. But I think, seeing the membership of our working group, both from a vendor standpoint and interest, and the people that we have, we talked about CDM, we talked about talking to the federal CISO, and the number of agencies that we have that have an interest in this. I think people are going to make strides. And yeah, you may have the 10%, 20%. But you know what? You're not at zero on this journey. And that's better than, anything's better than zero. And I'm getting a good understanding, starting at the ground roots and the baselining, of where's your data, how is it categorized? Because we found, some system owners, categorize their data low, or they over categorize it higher. So getting a good understanding, where is it flowing? A lot of baselining, I think, needs to be done. I think that's the hard work, understanding. But I think people are going to get on the same page, definition wise, a good understanding. From the participation that we have here today, there's a lot of interest, obviously. So I think we're gonna, people are gonna start at, probably have some projects that they've inventoried where they say, oh, this is part of my zero trust strategy, and adopt that into the larger architecture. But, I see at some point that I think the next year you're going to see some, the horse off and running into the races kind of thing.
Yep, I agree. Trefinia?
Yeah, I would like to see, and myself included, us have the plans in place so that we can start implementing, because with zero trust, there's that trust algorithm that all of the data, the asset, the identity, the network, all of that information is going to be feeding into. I would really love to see some vendor interoperability as well in the next year. But from a government perspective, it's getting those plans in place and then getting the buy-in that we need from leadership.
Great.
Mhm.
And Todd?
Yeah, I mean, to kind of tack on to what Trefinia stated, it's really getting that buy-in from the senior leaders, and then establishing that strategy. One thing I've also heard is that they want to start to incorporate some machine learning and also artificial intelligence technologies into zero trust, just reading online. So I can see, that incorporation happening as well. We just need buy-in.
Yep. And John, how about covering the Department of Defense? Actually, I just saw we should distribute this. NSA just came out with embracing a zero trust security model. So this is at the top of the list in security over there.
Yeah, and the department's working on the strategy, right? And that's kind of done. So I think you're already seeing pieces of zero trust, right? We just don't sometimes recognize it there. But again, that can lead to some very dangerous gaps if you don't have a plan and an architecture for those pieces and what you're exposing. So I already see COVID has led to, how do we put an identity store in the cloud that can be used across multiple clouds? How can we leverage some of the investments already made in PKI? That's just one example. I do agree with Todd on the artificial intelligence piece of this and machine learning. There's a lot of sound bites to that, but this isn't going to work without some engines that can process this information, right? And so I think industry's already doing this. Many of the retailers wouldn't be in business without this type of model. SBA is another one, for those that get PPP loans, that's coming from everywhere, every sector, right? How do you know to trust even some of the small banks or large banks or that thing? So I think it's there. And so I see it just moving a lot faster in the next year. So you got to have a plan.
Yep. And Greg, you are getting the last word. Where are we going to be a year from now? And that's your job to figure this out for us. We're going to end it with you. No pressure.
Well, hopefully the committee meeting with me here in Barbados would be a good step. But otherwise, I think, if we have a better understanding of the new common language that this is really all about, I think that's going to be a huge step from zero trust down to, SASE, ZTNA, and some of the really nuanced sort of technical discussions there. That's going to give confidence, I think, to a lot of organizations to move ahead. And not all organizations are going to move at the same speed, nor should they. But there's sort of the big mega projects that have to start, and there's also the small quick hits, that low-hanging fruit that has to start as well. And if you can't call it zero trust and win, call it resilience, because those concepts are dovetail. But this has to get better, because the pendulum's swinging towards the bad guys too much, and the status quo isn't working.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And panel one is in the books. Thank you, Trefinia, Gerald, Todd, John, and Greg. Really enjoyed this. And this panel two is going to have to really be a good one, because this first one was fantastic. Thank you all, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we are going into panel two, just like that. No transition. We're there. There we go. Let's get our folks on here. Fantastic. All right. Let's see. Okay, we've got, there's Devarius. All right, we're going to go to the quick introductions, and I hope everybody enjoyed that first panel. It was fantastic, and they kind of alluded to the topic of this panel is, and we're really going to be focused on cloud. So that kind of worked out. But just real quick introductions for each of our panelists. Maybe starting with Devarius Peoples. He's the Director and Chief Information Officer of the United States Army Corps of Engineers. How are you doing today, Devarius? Are you at home or at a dam somewhere? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, today I just came into the office, so I'm here for a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit.
Good, good. And we have with us also Jonathan Phoebus, who's the Chief Information Security Officer at the Office of the Chief Information Officer and the Office of the Executive Director for Operations at the United States Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Good to have you back, Jonathan.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
I think we got you. Do we have you, did I guess right? You're at the home office today.
I am at the home office today.
Fantastic. And we also have Shane Barney, Chief Information Security Officer at the United States Citizen and Immigration Services. How are you doing today, Shane? That kind of looks like an office.
It is an office, actually. I am in the office today, so no working home, no working from the Bahamas for me.
Oh, yeah, that was just cruel to bring that up. You know,
It was
at least
me,
we have a good day in DC, right?
Yeah, actually, it's very nice. Very
Yep,
pleasant.
yep. And we also have back Jamie Noble, Chief Information Security Officer at the Office of the Chief Information Officer. A lot of the titles today are long, guys. Office of Justice Programs, or OJP, at the United States Department of Justice. How are you doing today, Jamie?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back.
And I know from previous experience that set is your house, so
Yeah.
glad you could make it. Thanks for coming here. And then we have also Benjamin Andrew, who's principal technical PM for AWS and Migration Marketplace and Control Services. And where in the world are you today, Benjamin?
This is my home office and my fake wood wall that I have behind me.
Don't hit it too hard. You had me. And you hail from Texas, right?
Portland, Oregon area.
Portland, Oregon.
West Washington, yeah.
Oh yeah, I love Portland. I think that's where I really got my introduction to microbrews 20 years ago. So it's fantastic. Yeah. And last but not least, Aaron Ansari, who's VP of North American Sales for Cloud Solutions at Trend Micro.
Hey, I'm your Dallas guy. The Trend Micro is headquartered in Dallas, so that's must have been what you were thinking of for Texas. Yep.
Gotcha. And are you a Cowboys fan?
No.
No. Okay. Well, we won't mention anything about the Cowboys then. So we have some Washington D.C. folks here, so that worked out fantastic. Okay. Let's start off on this topic. Maybe start off with you, Devarius, on how you guys are looking at zero trust in the cloud and where you guys are going today with the Army Corps of Engineers.
Yeah, so we're looking at, from an Army Corps of Engineers standpoint, for those that are not as familiar, we have a unique mission, civil as well as federal, at the state and local level, as well as DOD. So with that being said, from a mission standpoint, building construction, building buildings, those type of things, levees, locks, and dams on the back end for the civil side. So from a cloud aspect, we're looking to operationalize zero trust now, take it from a theory perspective to really operationalizing it. So what does that mean? When you begin to think about how we're operating right now in a remote environment, trying to leverage a lot of mission collaboration tools, whether that's through Zoom, whether that's through Microsoft O365, Teams, and so many others, the goal is to be able to provide an enhanced level of security, but to allow those that need access to those resources to be able to do so. So if you look at taking the Microsoft Teams aspect, for example, within the DoD, we're using and leveraging a capability called CVR right now. And that allows for various departments to be able to connect and collaborate. And that has some aspects of Zero Trust built in it as well too, because you have many different departments leveraging one capability. So we're really operationalizing it through our O365 capability, as well as we look at it from the federal side through our civil works mission with our SCADA and industrial control systems as well. So using Zero Trust on your levees, your locks and dams to secure that critical infrastructure. So we see it from many different areas, but those are just several things within the Army Corps of Engineers that we're beginning to do to apply a Zero Trust concept and methodology.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're excited about this. This is going to make your job easier at the end of the day once you get it implemented. You know, it's not like a compliance type of thing, but we'll get into that a little bit. Next up, I'll go with you. How about you, Jamie, at OGP? You guys have been in the cloud. You're the, and people are getting too young, so I can't even bring it up. You're like the Mikey of the Department of Justice. You try new things out. You guys went to the cloud earlier than a lot of folks. So where are you guys on the Zero Trust?
Yeah, we're kind of like Devarius was saying, we're attacking it from multiple angles. One of the things, I know you mentioned OJP likes to be on the cutting edge. One of the things that we implemented at the organizational level several years ago was a virtual desktop infrastructure, so that from a user experience perspective, you know, you could have we already had a highly mobile workforce as it was, but really the end goal for our CIO was to implement a solution where our user population would have the same experience from, you know, any device, anywhere, anytime, as they would in the office from their government furnished equipment. And so, you know, we had completely implemented a VDI infrastructure, whether you're in the office or working from home or anywhere managing your grants. We had implemented that just prior to COVID and the max telework being put into place. And so we were really well positioned going into this whole pandemic in the first place, which was really, really fortunate. But then we're also attacking Zero Trust or you know, embodying, you know, and implementing Zero Trust for our external user population that is going to be accessing right now our brand new Just Grants application, which is the modernization of our grants management platform, as well as implementing Zero Trust when it comes to federating identities from other components within DOJ.
Great, you got a lot going on over at OGP.
We do.
OJP.
We do.
So Jonathan, I mean, in the title of your agency, we're talking regulatory and nuclear, two things that are pretty important. How do you see Zero Trust at NRC, and how are you guys implementing it?
So as we went out for the COVID health crisis, we were in a pretty good position. We had been working towards making all of our applications mobile capable, mobile ready. We had just recently provisioned all of our workforce with laptops instead of desktops. But then we started noticing the amount of bandwidth that we needed to keep VPN up and running to get everyone online at the same time. So we started rethinking a lot of our applications. We've been moving a lot of workloads to the cloud. We've already got a lot of productivity apps and file storage up there. And we started thinking, boy, wouldn't it be a lot easier if folks didn't have to pass through the central network for everything? And that got us really started to think about how we could re-architect things for Zero Trust, how we could start automating things for our licensees as well to let them get to the data they needed through microservices and microsegmentation. So it's been a big year for us as we've looked to move more workloads to the cloud and get them right-sized so that we're in a better position for Zero Trust.
Great. It always sticks out to me, and I know we did that one NRC day. It always sticks out to me that you guys actually war gamed COVID like the week before everybody didn't go back to the office. And boy, what good timing that was.
We made sure that everyone had card readers. We made sure that everyone knew how to connect their laptops to their home networks. And we had a couple of days where we had as many folks as we could work from home to test things out. So we like to make sure we're ready.
So next we'll go over to Shane, and Shane, I know COVID has been really major job harder and processing people, et cetera, et cetera. How are you guys looking at Zero Trust there, and how does that relate to the rest of the department?
So interestingly enough, Zero Trust did not help us with COVID. USCIS is very similar to a business. We're a fee-driven organization for the most part, and part of what we have to do is to meet with people, and obviously COVID made that a challenge. If you're not meeting with people, you're not generating funds for your agency, and in like any business, it caused some interesting times for us. But for CIS in general, we had started our journey to cloud like 10, 12 years ago, something like that. At the time, Mark Schwartz was our CIO. He actually works for Amazon right now. Actually, Amazon keeps stealing my people. I need to talk to him about that. But we started our journey then. In doing so, while we were obviously thinking about Zero Trust at the time, cloud drives Zero Trust. You define your perimeter at that point becomes only what you think it to be, not what it really is in truth. You have to start rethinking how you architect your system, how you think about your network and your enterprise. And it drove that requirement. A second piece that Mark did at that time as well is he made identity and access control part of security. In other words, as a CISO, I own it. I drive those requirements, and he tied it into authorizations for systems. You wanted to authorize your system. You want a new system deployed. You want a new release. Oh, that's great. Are you single sign-on compliant? Those two small kind of things, they were fairly minor really at the time, because it just wasn't, we weren't thinking in terms of Zero Trust per se, but it really drove that. And of course, now as I'm looking back, I realize how fortunate we were, and how much foresight Mark had. Whether he realized it or not, I don't know, but I kind of think he did. And in doing so as well, it created an ongoing sort of like, this is just how we do business. It's not even questioned anymore. Our development teams don't question it. You don't even think about having a password. We don't have passwords. So when COVID hit from that perspective, we were set up pretty well. As much as our work that could be done at home could be done at home. What we were then able to do is focus in on things that would enable us to be able to still work and do it virtually. And so we are able to very quickly, within about a 2-week period of time, stand up a video infrastructure that allowed us to do remote video interviews and begin facilitating the business of our enterprise, or the business of our organization, and get back to doing normal. And more importantly, of course, we're providing the services out to the people who require them, here in the United States and around the world. Having Zero Trust as that basis, though, there's so much we've gathered or so much we've gotten from that, mostly without realizing it at first, until we start focusing in and realizing the value, and more importantly, the more scarier side of not having it in place. The first time you realize that your cloud perimeter is just an imaginary line that you say it's there, but it's really truly not. And it's only there is if you begin wrapping certain types of mitigations around it and begin doing things in the right way, in the right form. Zero Trust is a critical element of that. Of course, then expanding and pushing that journey out, because I've always seen Zero Trust not as a destination, it's an ongoing journey. There is no right or wrong answer per se. It's driven by the needs of your organization and what's required for your organization. So what works for me doesn't necessarily work for anybody else. But what is true is those sort of core elements, the importance of having good identity, having control over your access and roles, ensuring authentication at the right time, the right place, degradation of that authentication. How long can you really trust somebody, and what does it mean to trust? Defining even elements like that are so critical as you move through this journey of Zero Trust and wherever that ends up taking you. But if you're heading to cloud, you're heading to Zero Trust, whether you like it or not. They're sort of kind of tied at the hip. So.
Yep. And you know what? I think you guys have always been innovative, and that actually helps you attract talent. So you're getting good talent, and that's not a bad thing that Amazon and other big companies recognize that, but it perpetuates itself. You keep getting good talent. So I know it's tough to.
That's okay. They haven't taken me, oddly enough. I'm not sure what that means. I should be hurt by that.
You never know. Benjamin, you've got the opportunity to see macro trends, especially from cutting edge cool companies that are in healthcare or, financial. And so where's Zero Trust gone from where do you see it now and where it's going and how Amazon looks at it?
Well, first of all, before we go there, I wanted to offer Shane a job if I could do that real quick.
He's blushing. Oh my gosh.
Private jet.
So, I think, a lot of you guys are hitting the nail on the head that it's really about thinking about cloud, using the cloud is a couple of things. One is the architecture of your applications and how they're developed, especially as customers are using microservices to develop your applications. And really the resiliency story is a big part of it. And then access is a big part of it. And so there's the access that the end users have. A lot of you guys talked about end user application access and not having to go through not having to go through the network. And, we do see the corporate network concept kind of shifting significantly to the point that, and it all comes down to resiliency and access to applications, like not requiring people to go through VPN, choke points. I don't know about you guys with all the video conference calls, how many times I've disabled my VPN because my internet connection slows down so much when I'm on video that I can't even stay on video. But, just seeing the need for application access around the world and for the sake of preventing failures and ensuring that, we tell customers, hey, to design your applications in a multi-availability zone approach so that when the event that some failure does happen, because they do, then you're insulated from that. So that's one key, and then just, I think the other piece of it is really comes down to the shared responsibility model. By default, as customers use the cloud resources, we're providing as much visibility into the compliance and the privacy of each customer's data. And, we're ensuring that the resources of the cloud are online, but ultimately, as a customer, you have to decide what access you give to your data. And so we provide best practices and guidance, but ultimately it comes down to you guys as a customer to decide who can see the information that you post inside your own cloud resources. So we call that security in the cloud. And that's really where it comes down to just best practices, and you guys are doing that. So it's great to hear that.
Great. And last but not least, we'll go over to Aaron. And I know that Zero Trust is a big part of what Trend Micro is, where their product set is today. Love to hear your comments.
Yeah, just to echo off of Ben's comment was in relation to the shared responsibility model. I'd go a step further and say the well-architected framework is really something that takes that notion of understanding your perimeter, understanding your edges, understanding your network, and implementing it, right? So what we often find with our customers, and we have thousands of customers, tens of thousands of customers all over the world, what we find when we go in and do consulting and we talk and work for the architecture is, yes, understanding, where the cloud providers or AWS's responsibility ends and yours begins, but beyond that, taking the best practices and recommendations and implementing them. And so we sit down with them and say, okay, let's do a well-architected review. Let's look at what's happening from a technology perspective and understand, hey, you have to implement key access rotations. How does that work in your policies and your procedures and the way that you do things? And we used our Cloud One technology platform to do that. But it's by design and based off of the fundamentals, right? And I think that's what we're all getting to here is we're talking about the best practice fundamentals and then the technology that's used to augment and do it. So best practices such as, the shared responsibility model and your understanding of it, best practices such as the well-architected framework, then can be leveraged with technology. But I don't want it to be redundant. I kind of think that the whole zero trust thing is a little bit redundant and we're like bell bottoms and 80s fashion is coming back. Like I think zero trust.
Hey, what's wrong with that?
Nothing. What I'm saying is zero trust is kind of, network access control, it's things that we talked about in the early 2000s. It's just kind of back and we're implementing it with endpoint protection and cloud workload protection and network IDS and attack surface mapping and modeling. But the premise of what we're doing kind of, to me, is like something we talked about in the early to mid 2000s.
Interesting.
Least privilege, right? Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, enabling least privilege access, LPA, understanding, user accesses and mapping it out across your organization. To me, it's just kind of, it's been there, and we're recycling it and relabeling it a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Let's do this because I'm going to forget it. So sometimes I forget things. So I'm, from the 80s, that was like my peak decade. So I'm getting a little bit older now, but let's go to the poll questions. I want to go through those and then we'll open it up to questions. I want to get to more of the user questions this time. We got so many and I didn't get a chance to get to them all, so I feel kind of bad. So anyway, let's go to the poll. Let's get the first one up, Alyssa. What has been the biggest challenge when implementing zero trust security within your agencies? Verifying users' identities, validating devices, limiting privileged access, evaluating remote access. I'm not sure, we've not implemented yet. So good, well thought out questions. Thank you to our team here. All right, what do we got? All right, Alyssa, what kind of results are we looking at? A little across the board, huh? We're all over the place. Jamie, you're looking at it. Have you come up with any thoughts? You have to think fast here on these poll questions, but.
Yeah, I saw, devices was the most popular answer in terms of difficulty with implementation. And I would agree with that, at least from my standpoint. Right now at OJP, we're also embarking on utilizing derived credentials on our mobile devices so that we can be even more mobile when we're away from our computers or away from our keyboards. We can have our mobile devices with us and respond to a message on Teams or on Jabber or something like that. And so it has been a heavy lift just in terms of, all of the technological things that need to occur in order to do that and have their certificates, available on the mobile devices so that we can get people set up with that. So it's been challenging, but I think the reward is going to be really great. I completely agree with what Shane was saying about it being, an organizationally specific journey in terms of what's right for your organization and how you work. And couldn't agree more with Aaron on the kind of reinvention of the idea of least privilege and basic, role-based access controls. But hey, we got to be like Madonna and reinvent ourselves every couple of years, right?
Here we go, the 80s. I love it.
Stick with us.
Fantastic. The various, any comments on this?
I would say device validation. As we deploy, just using the O365 concept and methodology, especially as you deploy the different modules, teams, and having access to SharePoint and those other type of things. Right now, we have the ability to leverage the OWA capability inside of that environment without having to go through a VPN. You can access it from a web browser. So with that being said, from a government perspective, we are allowing government devices to be able to connect, but we're not necessarily allowing personal devices to connect. And that's just due to the fact of ensuring that the cybersecurity elements are enhanced and we can control that. So working through with the various Microsoft security product suite and those type of things, device validation is critical because you don't want to allow personal devices because you're not necessarily sure of the patch level, the security level, and those type of things. Even though people would prefer those, you got to crawl before you run and really understanding what the landscape looks like. So we've kind of limited those devices to just government furnished equipment at this time to connect to that O365 environment. So the device validation aspect was critical because we don't want devices that are not government furnished to have access to that environment to reduce the threat vector.
Great, great. And Jonathan, I believe you guys have had BYOD at some point or in the past. I remember.
We still have BYOD. As a matter of fact, we just released the iOS and Android apps for Office 365 to allow that on BYO devices. So we've gotten over the hump of being able to make sure the state of those devices is what we want, that we can validate the users But the biggest challenge, I would say, is keeping up with the user specific permissions. People move around and change roles, and making sure that we've got them in the right access groups so that they get the right data and don't keep attributes that they had in their old job. That's pretty much the biggest challenge we're facing right now.
Great. And Shane, any comments on that poll question?
Yeah, I can't see the polls via the web client. So just, anyway, no, we're a little bit, we're pretty far into this sort of zero trust journey. So we kind of got different problem sets. We've managed to do single sign-on across the agency in all of our applications, and we've gotten almost all. We're close to having everything done through role-based access and controls, and we have a lot of visibility and a lot of granularity there. And we've been very fortunate to leverage the shared model all the way through and have a good understanding of that. And matter of fact, we rely on it from a security perspective on a consistent, constant basis. I just trust Amazons of the world to do the right jobs at that line in the sand, and that we're responsible for this side and you're responsible for that. We're to the point now where we're starting to look at, okay, clearly there are still, even as far as we've advanced it, as far as we are with it, there are still challenges that we're faced with that we now recognize, hey, this is not the end alls of solutions. And there's still gaps, and those gaps need to be addressed. We need to start looking at what it actually means to trust. If a device comes on your network, it's probably not a 1 or a 0 in terms of its trust. It's more granular than that. There's a gradient of how you trust and what that trust means. So, if something comes on and you haven't seen it for a while and that's a little weird, then that's something to question. Does that mean you trust fully or not at all? Probably not. There's probably something in between. And looking at how we do that and how we implement that. And that's one of the pieces that we're working on now. Establishing, we talk a lot about multi-factor authentication and, having hard tokens and PIP cards for government tends to be the case, but that's probably not enough either. So now we're looking at how we layer that. We're getting ready to implement a new approach to doing certain functions that we consider high risk within the enterprise that are separate and apart from our sort of standard tokens that we use for multi-factor authentication. Not because I don't trust them, but I don't trust them. I want to make sure that at the end of the day, if you're a domain admin and you have the ability to burn me to the ground, I want to really know that it's you, and I want to make sure that it's you. That also involves doing things like just-in-time administration, where you come in, you get a 2-hour window or whatever it is you require. It's all automated in terms of the approvals because you've been pre-approved for that level of access. But the time that you have to do it is constricted, and we know exactly when you'll be doing it and when you won't be doing it. And at the end of that period, it shuts off. And so, being able to do things like that, we're actually should by September have just-in-time in place, as well as a secondary authentication piece for certain domain actions. But those are really the sort of challenges and things that are keeping me up at night, and really where we're trying to focus our efforts.
Great, thank you for that. And let's go to our private sector folks. Starting with you, Benjamin.
Yeah, so I think there's some guidance actually that Aaron was talking about with the well-architected framework. And one of my roles right now at AWS is to develop a new management and governance lens that helps customers to figure out, in case of where they don't necessarily want to build out every capability and taking identity and access as one of the capabilities in management and governance. There's a lot of tools on the market that can help you in both identity providers as well as controlling access to AWS resources and setting up standards using things like service catalog and things. But we're producing a well-architected lens that guides customers to define the requirements that they should be considering. And then as they look at available AWS services as well as third-party solutions, we're giving them guidance of here's the things to consider. And then also we're writing a specification to those third parties that we're integrating with, for example, with identity providers like Okta and Ping Identity and OneLogin. And we're giving them guidance of how to integrate with AWS IAM and SSO so that they are actually doing the heavy lifting on behalf of the customer. And the customer can continue to use their solution rather than having to trade it out when they come to the cloud. So there's a lot of guidance that we're really working to provide right now. And we're actually testing this out in financial services and public sector customers. So be exciting to see it. I'm glad to share that with you, with this audience, as well as we get it published here pretty soon. So,
oh, fantastic. We'll definitely be distributing that if that's okay by you.
absolutely.
Aaron?
Yeah, and yeah, again, Benjamin, you and I are back and back operating off of one another. So this wasn't planned. It's just, this is one of the beauties of natural organic panels. Again, it's the ability to have the visibility and this, I'm using ility a lot as a suffix, the ability to have the visibility and scalability that's needed in today's environment. Oftentimes, you might have a technology, Trend Micro's Cloud One conformity in play. Great. And that's doing your well-architected review and your shared responsibility model handling. Fantastic. Do you have somebody to watch it? Do you have somebody to do the work for it? Do you have the Lambda function set up to do the response from a trigger, event sort of thing? And if you don't, you might have the visibility, but you don't have that scalability kind of taken care of. And that's where the kind of blend of technology solutions and resources comes into play. Because you might have, some of these people, these organizations, these esteemed panelists next to me might have thousands of developers in their organizations, and one site reliability engineer and one cloud architect and one, the ratio just doesn't match, right? And even if you have consultants and third parties that are all doing stuff for you, you still only have 1 or 2 or 5, single digit, binary resources on your team. So you have to have the visibility, yes, and the technologies, call me, I'd be glad to help you, fine. But you got to have that scalability and the ability to respond to that quickly and with being correct.
Great. Now we're going to go to our next poll questions. They're actually really good. I'll tell you what, if we can pull those up, and I'm going to take my time a little bit. I brushed it a little bit last time. I got a little negative feedback, so I will try to do a little better job. On a scale from 1 to 5, how important was zero trust security when your agency was making the switch to remote work? Not important at all. Not really that important. Neither important or not important. It was pretty important. Zero trust security was very important during this switch. So it's going to be very interesting. I don't know what's going to come out of this, but please submit your questions, your answers, and we'll see what it does. See what happens here. All right. I think we have enough time there, Alyssa. Okay, what do we got? Okay, it looks like, I don't know, let's keep that one up. Alyssa, maybe we can get back to it. Let's go to the next question, and then we'll let the panel comment on it. And this is a kind of a companion to that. Maybe we can pull them both up when we're done. Let's go to the next question. How satisfied are you with the ability to secure cloud through zero trust security in your agency? Very satisfied, satisfied, neither satisfied or unsatisfied. Okay. And Alyssa, oh, we can't pull them up at the same time. So we'll concentrate. Let's finish this question, Alyssa, and then we'll address them one by one. Okay. That is that the first one or second one? Let me see. Okay.
That's the second.
That's the second one. Okay. Neither satisfied nor unsatisfied, kind of neutral, kind of all over the map. Let's go back to the first one, Alyssa.
They both kind of say the same thing to me.
Go ahead. Expound on that a little bit.
Neither was ready. No one was ready, right? Like they didn't think about it, and it happened, and they're like, oh shoot. This was a project on our 2023, 2025 radar. And the shutdown or the pandemic forced their hand.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, Jamie. Go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I was thinking the same thing. It was either like, you were kind of like, maybe like us, fortunately enough, that we were kind of already down the path. And so, I mean, it was just kind of was what it was. I could have said, oh, it was top of mind and really important. But the fact of the matter is that, we were there. And for those that weren't, I think it was probably a scramble. And, something that I can kind of relate to, or our organization can relate to, is at the time, this time last year, we hadn't rolled out Microsoft Teams. So we weren't ready really from like a collaboration tool standpoint of how we were going to support users collaborating outside of the office. And so that was we just had to go. We just had to roll it out. We had to, tweak some things in terms of our mobile conferencing and allowing users to participate with different platforms, on different platforms, collaborating with different people. So I kind of equate it to that. And it was just, I think those questions kind of just speak for themselves. As either you were ready and you went with it and you were well positioned, or you weren't and you just had to do the best you could.
Right. How about you, Devarius?
Yeah, so from a Army Corps standpoint, I don't believe it impacted, hindered, or enhanced when you think from an operational perspective. The reason why I say that is because, again, Zero Trust adds an additional or a different perspective to security. However, we operate in a secure environment currently as it is, and you operate with the concept or the perspective of deny all, allow by exception. And with that understanding and concept, when it came to aggressively being able to ensure we could support a remote workforce and environment, we were operating in that posture already. I think what it forced us to do was to take a look at our IT strategic roadmap and identify where it's set on the scale and make a determination of what we needed to move from the right more so to the left to enhance the cyber posture. And hence you see a good flavor of Zero Trust and day-to-day operational concepts being baked in. So that's where I'm going to say we as a core had to evolve, because again, we were doing operational things routinely from a cyber perspective, but being able to add some of these additional elements to ensure we have an enhanced cyber posture, hence some of the Zero Trust elements. That's when we had to bake some of those things in. So we had a good balance, but it didn't hinder or support us from that manner, but it did help enhance our operational posture as we continue to evolve.
Great. And how about you, Shane?
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same page as them. That in the sense that it didn't really help or hurt. I mean, it probably helped more than we realized, and we just are so used to it being there that we didn't think twice about it. But because we already had a lot of these foundational pieces in place, we didn't worry about it as much. And we already had a pretty, I wouldn't say significant, we had about, of our 29,000 or so employees, about 5,000 on any given day were already teleworking. Granted, we weren't all teleworking at once, but still we were already used to doing it as an agency to some level, to some degree. Where we saw the real pain points is where we had in-person interviews and things like that required a presence. And then again, that's where we were able to pivot and do some things that way. And Zero Trust probably added to some elements that at least helped secure those pieces and parts as we put them in place very, very quickly. From my perspective, how does Zero Trust help us, secure the cloud? Well, it is core to it, but it's only a piece of it. It's one of those puzzle pieces of the larger security world. And I'm, as my team would tell you, I am never, ever satisfied. I'm always tweaking it and adding to it and changing it and adapting our program because the threat landscape continues to adapt. Therefore, we have to adapt. I don't see Zero Trust or our approach to authentication and identity as any different than that. We're not going to just solve it and move on. We're going to potentially solve it and then tweak it and adjust it and add to it and make it better, faster, quicker, smarter. From my perspective, the most important thing we're doing now is the automation pieces in the back end. Adding in the ability to do automated alerting and all of the for my SOC. USCIS takes in, I don't even know how many, 7-8 terabytes of log data in a given day. That's more than any one human being can possibly hope to look at. So automation really becomes your biggest friend. And that automation being applied across your entire security landscape is equally as important into not only just how you implement Zero Trust, but how you automate Zero Trust and automate all the pieces and parts around. And that actually has been the biggest challenge, biggest thing that we're moving forward on, how we secure the enterprise.
Great. I'm gonna switch it over to Benjamin. Clouds, and it's basically that thing that you brought up, Shane. In what ways does Zero Trust Security help to secure the cloud? I mean, we've had cloud now for over 10 years. Amazon, I remember Teresa got there about 10 years ago for the Gov Cloud. How has Zero Trust been incorporated in cloud over time?
Well, I think it's interesting to talk about it in different areas. So we've talked about, remote work. So using, cloud-based applications like Zoom or Amazon Chime or wherever to do remote work. There's the, if you're measuring your effectiveness or your use of Zero Trust, it's important to look at all the different areas that Zero Trust can affect, all the different use cases. And one of them is application access. Jonathan talked about that. How are users accessing applications? Some of you guys are doing Outlook Web Access, so you're not having to secure endpoints that are not owned by your agency. You're just eliminating that problem just by saying, yeah, use a website to get email. That's another easy way. Then there's the architecture of applications. How are applications being designed and modernized to take advantage of microservices and to take advantage of multiple availability zones and resiliency? So, but if you look across the spectrum, it's really, it's each cloud asset needs to be provisioned with identity and access management controls and guardrails. The network has to be defined with specific IAM boundaries. The security operations need to have specific capabilities to remediate and address incidents. And as Shane talked about, there's a lot of data that you have to parse through. So using tools that can help you with that. And I know that, Trend Micro has an integration with Splunk in some areas there to make that easier for you. Service management capabilities, you have to be able to have updated federated access defined within IAM for change access, et cetera. So, and then there's all the IAM activities that need to be included on the observability functions and application performance management. So there's really quite a number of areas. It almost is really just more of a mindset, more of a process methodology that you need to apply to applications, network, users, visibility, observability. So I think that's when, as you're trying to measure your environment and to ask yourself the question, have I done Zero Trust? You need to kind of look at each area to really be able to measure it accurately, I think. But.
And Aaron, how is your product set over there? As time has gone on, how has it evolved to, not just monitor the cloud, but really enforce Zero Trust security?
I think the best way to state that it's evolving, Ben said it, we've had a solution set that does it. I think the best way to showcase its evolution is that the solution set continues to offer new modules or components to our customers and to the platform itself. So, while it might have started with 3, now it has 6, soon to be 7, we have to be responsive to what we're seeing and what our customers are seeing. And when we're seeing open source code, being utilized, we're going to have to do some sort of integration or use some sort of open source code. 10 years ago, open source was like, don't come near me, garlic and holy water. And now open source code is like, hey, every developer that's coming up through the ranks is utilizing it. And so you have to be modular, and you have to, specialize in what's great, but bringing in the new components and developing products that specialize in what's happening with the development and with the cloud builders or skycrafters, as we call them, has to be done. And we're doing that, right? And so we have, an open source solution component. We have a cloud configuration, CSPM, cloud security posture management solution. And it's just what has to be done to adapt to what's coming. But Ben, I'd ask you, I mean, the big thing is from what we're seeing is, we're the small and nimble vendor, and we're moving along and providing what we think the developers and the community needs. But I kind of view AWS and the cloud providers as this big steamroller behind us that's going to be like, yeah, we're going to come out with a cloud posture management piece, and yeah, we're going to come out with a something else to help build up. So it's kind of it's a balance, or there's a little bit of a juggling act with what's happening.
Yeah, it's true.
Makes a lot of sense. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Benjamin. Finish that thought.
Yeah, just one comment there. I think that at least where we're focusing today is that is the goal to get everybody to use every AWS service, or is the goal to help them to get to the cloud and to close their data centers? They have, capital expenses. They have to close data centers out so they don't have to refresh all this hardware. CIOs are saying, go move 500,000, 6,000 applications in this time frame. So we are embracing the tools that customers already use. And so we've actually, for example, in service management and CMDBs like ServiceNow and Jira, Atlassian Jira Service Desk, like they're already using these tools. We don't need to replace them. So what we're doing is we're building connectors for these vendors to actually make it easier for those customers to use ServiceNow and Jira in AWS, linking to Service Catalog, building app registry so that they can have an application view within their CMDB and then they can see what resources are associated with which applications. So we're really the goal is to come alongside rather than to try to push them to make all these decisions. They already have too many decisions to make. So let's make it easier. That's really the focus that we have right now.
Great. Okay. And Jonathan, I forgot to ask you about this. I just want to get your comments, where your thoughts are at.
That's fine. It's been an interesting ride because we were doing a lot of stuff over the years, and lo and behold, we've been building our way towards a zero trust architecture, making decisions about the workstations and machines that people are coming in from, whether it's a GFE device, whether it's a BYO device, looking at the people who are coming in, what permissions they have, whether they're coming in as an administrator, whether they're coming in with other privileges, whether they're coming in as a plain user, and what decisions we've been making over the years has been a great foundation. And we're in multiple clouds, but a lot of that foundational work works wherever our app, wherever our data goes. So yay, we were preparing ourselves all along. So moving out to full telework was a bit of a shock about where the bandwidth is going. But for the rest of it, the decisions were not that different from what we've been looking at. The data flows, the workflows, the security questions, and the incidents we've been having really haven't changed all that much. So I would say that, chance favors the prepared mind, and we had already given ourselves a lot of positive success for rolling out Zero Trust, even without understanding fully what it was that we were doing.
Great. The next question, I think it's a pretty good one. How is Zero Trust evolving the federal government's view of security? And I'm going to start off with you, Devarius. How is it Zero Trust changing the way you look at things from the security perspective?
Well, I'm not going to say it's changing the way we look at things, because at the end of the day, from a security perspective, the goal is to ensure that end users can effectively do their job in a secure manner. But I think one of the things that it's actually doing is it is forcing us to reinvent ourselves from a cyber perspective, as well as being able to embrace the current posture in which it is that we're forced to work in, being out of a remote environment. So being that you're coming in, having connections from multiple locations, having users all over the world, just try to leverage your capability or leverage your environment, is just ensuring that we are operating at a more enhanced level. So it's not so much changing our view of the world, because as you think Zero Trust, you also think continuous monitoring, and so many other different cyber terms. I use that. You think of all the cyber terms. So Zero Trust is just an additional term to force you to think in an additional or different manner. But overall, it's not really forcing the change as to how we operate. It's just forcing us to think additionally about several additional concepts.
Interesting. How about you, Jamie? We got you on mute or something?
Yes, I did. Sorry about that.
You got the double mute thing, it throws you off sometimes.
Yeah. Incognito mute. Yeah, I would say I agree wholeheartedly. And really what Zero Trust is doing is allowing security to be the great enabler of the mission and the user experience, honestly. I think it's, the timing is really great, and being able to leverage the technology that supports and allows us to implement Zero Trust has really been able to, as security professionals, we've been able to allow a lot more things that maybe if we were positioned differently, we would feel like we need to say no. And so for me, it's really enabled me being able to enable the mission of OJP in a really secure way. And so, it's made my job a lot easier and a lot more enjoyable, and it's made my stakeholders really, really happy.
Great, great. How about you, Shane?
I'm not going to say it's made my life better or happier. I'm going to go work for her. So, from my perspective, cloud does change the fundamental nature of how we do things. If your infrastructure is code, your security needs to be code as well. So the very nature of even our SOC operations has changed. Whereas in the past you had your tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 kind of analysts. Now you have a development team in there too. At least I do. I don't know if everybody else does, but I do. I've responded to enough cloud incidences now at this point to recognize the importance of developers. And on top of that, we have to start looking at how we leverage cloud for security as well. Instead of just worrying about securing the cloud, which of course is important, is how does the cloud enhance our security in and of itself? Zero Trust obviously is a clear example of that. But there are other use cases that allow us to, be more behavioral level analysis that we're now getting into and pushing hard and heavy into. A lot of our SOC automation is done through cloud technologies. And of course, now we're starting to leverage machine learning and artificial intelligence. I'll just go ahead and say it. There's barely intelligence in Washington, D.C., artificial or otherwise sometimes. But, that all said, it does enable security in a new way, fashion, and form. USCIS is really going hard and heavy into the microservices world. If you're a federal agency, a microservice is not a system by any definition or stretches of the imagination. It creates an entirely new challenge for how you do your business and how you understand your system boundaries, how you authenticate things, how you authorize things. To me, it offers, the challenges also offer unique opportunities to redo how you do security. So a focus, like for me, we no longer, I've removed the compliance mindset, the check the box security nations of kind of the old days, and got away from that and really focused heavily on the threat hunting and cyber intelligence integrations and those sorts of things. And those are all and to me, that's all part of that same bigger ecosystem of the security world, which you leverage cloud. And of course, we're not going to go just to Amazon because they didn't hire me; they hired all my employees. But doing multi-cloud and the multi-cloud doesn't solve security problems; it creates them. But you do have some interesting opportunities there that you can leverage some of those technologies across platforms to enhance your visibility and to enhance the ability to get in front of and be more proactive towards the security front. With that all said, I've had a lot of sleepless nights lately, so. There's definitely some interesting times.
Sorry to hear that, Shane.
Okay.
Jonathan, love to hear your comments.
So leveraging the cloud with all of the data that we get from our cloud security tools from the cloud providers altogether, the pace at which they're able to innovate and change the services that they're offering sometimes is overwhelming, and we get so many new capabilities, it's difficult for us to go through and implement them all at a possible pace. But if I were sitting on my own in my agency trying to come up with these capabilities on my own, I wouldn't be as far along on my journey as I am. So I'm very appreciative at how much penetration that there is in the cloud realm, so that all of these capabilities are coming to me as a small agency. It makes my life much easier, helps me keep the game moving along, and it helps me provide those services more securely, faster, and at an affordable cost to my end users to keep that mission going along. So very excited that we can work with the cloud providers to make all this happen.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Benjamin, real quick.
Yeah, just for those who don't know, there are data classification regions that are available in AWS for different government agencies. There's GovCloud, and then there's also the secret special regions. So if you're not aware, there's a lot of investment that AWS has made to take the commercial software catalog in AWS Marketplace and make that available in the special regions as well, in air-gapped classified regions. So that's something to be aware of, that you should be able to now use even SaaS-based software in the special regions, which is pretty cool. But just to highlight too, the data questions, like data, there's a couple concerns that I kind of keep hearing a little bit. One is, the customer and the agency has the ownership of where their data sits, and data sovereignty laws, what country it sits in, sovereignty. You have access and control over that. We don't move your data. We don't change where you put it. So it's important to put policies in place. And this is where I'll put a plug in for Trend and their Cloud One conformity product. Worked with the Michaels before Cloud Conformity came on the team. But I think using automation, back to your point, Shane and Jonathan, there's so much change and so many new improvements and capabilities coming, that to manage the controls and guardrails for customers, it's important to use automation to make sure that you're putting the right, not just putting the right policies in place, but validating those policies. So Service Catalog will help you a lot with that too, because it gives you an ability to set a template and say, here, use these, and these are the approved services, and these are the approved instance types, and you can control cost and control usage that way. But I think just using automation is really important.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. And Aaron, I think we got a minute here to get the last word on this panel, at least. No pressure or anything.
Yeah, well, I think this has actually been a great discussion. Not that I wasn't expecting it to be great, but it's nice when something lives up or exceeds your expectations. From a blend of doing the right things and having the solution sets available, I think it's clear that we've got technologies and companies and people representative here that can help you and give you guidance for your journey towards Zero Trust. I don't think it's we had a question come in through the chat and talking about, well, is it network? Is it mobile? Is it desktop? Is it endpoint? Those sorts of things. Yeah, I don't think it's single technology focused. You have to pick a place to start, and for every company it's different. We can guide you down the network path and then branch out to your applications and other components of your architecture. But each company has to take and approach the model with what's most valuable for it. And like we said in the beginning of the call, when you do that self-assessment, you understand where your data is, what your risk is, kind of the attack surface, as well as, the data classification of what's important to you. We can help you do that. And it's something that we've done time and time again. And it's something with each implementation, just like every AWS implementation and environment that's built is different and unique. We can go through and help you map and build out something that is bespoke, but functional for you.
Well, that's the last word on the panel. This has been, thank you panelists for living up to the hype, okay?
That's great.
Thank you, Aaron, Benjamin, Shane, Jamie, Jonathan, and Devarius. Great conversation. And we will see you all next time. Dean's going to close us out. Dean Kiefer, Trend Micro's Federal Civilian Territory Manager. We got Dean on. There he is. He's at corporate. He's a corporate guy.
Tom, thank you. This was you and I spoke about this back in October, November, and thank you to all the panelists today. Awesome job by everybody. I appreciate the work, the partnership, with AWS and ATARC and August Shell, and both panels were outstanding. I thought, Tom, today, both hammering home ideas, based on their needs and specific environments. And but the most intriguing to me was, Shane made a comment, regarding SOC and the SOC for the cloud, and how does the SOC team adapt to the cloud? I thought that was pretty interesting, definitely a good discussion for the future. So again, thank you to everybody, and we really appreciate everybody attending, and thank you for all those that dialed in also.
You got it. All right, brother. Have a good rest of the day, and thank you all for sticking with us. And let's show what we have next, Alyssa, real quick. We have what our next programming on the ATARC channel is, or do we not have anything? Okay. Anyway, everybody have a good day, and we got some homework. We're going to get you out some information. And next week we have breach detection becoming as agile as the attackers, and we're putting together a good program for you there. Once again, thank you for tuning in to the ATARC channel, and everybody have a good week and a great weekend, and take advantage of the nice weather we have here in Washington, D.C.